Oops. The sky has just opened up. It's pouring like crazy here. I hope you will watch my If Then episode this afternoon. If you like this author, then maybe like that author. We started out with the Bridgertons. If you like Julia Quinn's Bridgertons, maybe you like Stephanie Lawrence Sinsters, or Joanna Lindsay's Mallory's, or Catherine Coulter Sherbrooke's. We did Homicides. We did Native American Detectives, Tony Hillerman and Group. I did Black authors. I did Homicides. I did FBI. I did Witches. I did Vampires. I need people to watch my videos. If you haven't seen those, please go watch those. Also, please go and watch Flashback Mondays, where I talk about all the books reviewed in Romantic Times Book Review Magazine. I do over 60 books each episode, so please go check those out. And please check out my daily book reviews. We are doing J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood, James Patterson's Alex Cross series, and Victoria Thompson's Gaslight series. And we are also doing Star Trek Next Generation each and every Friday. We do a recap. We are on season 5, disc 6, episode 222. Last week we did The Perfect Mate. Today we're doing Imaginary Friend. Next week it's the Borg. And the week after is the next phase. So we'll have to see what that's all about. So, I have lost my marbles. So, there is no voiceover for the beginning of this. So let's get started. I wish I could run it and talk to you at the same time, but there are copyright issues that I'm too little of anybody. I'm a nobody, so Oh, and should I say, welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina, Kristina. This is where we read books and talk about books. No special effects going on here. What you see is what you get. Low budget, very, very low budget, no budget videos. And I hope you will stick with me for this imaginary friend. So we start at the episode with Counselor Troy with Clara, and her father has asked Troy to talk to her because she has an imaginary friend that she's spending all her time with, and her father would like her to get to know some real children. So, Troy is talking to Clara. And Clara is telling her that she likes to cook all kinds of stuff, including yogurt, raisin salad, chocolate chip pancakes, and purple omelets. And Troy's like, purple omelets? And she's like, yes, you put grape juice in them. Isabella doesn't like it very much. She says it tastes funny. And Troy serves the tea. And she says, sugar with your tea? And Clara says, yes, please. And she asks Isabella if Isabella would like tea, and Isabella says yes, but she would like 2 sugars in her tea. And Troy says, I'll bet Isabella is really pretty. And Clara says, she's very pretty. She has blonde hair, blue dress, white buttons, her ears are pierced, and she's tall. Troy says, maybe you could draw me a picture. I'd love to see what she looks like. And Clara gets all upset that Troy doesn't believe that Isabella is real. And Troy says, I think she's real enough for you. That's all that matters. So Sutter and Troy have a little conversation after Isabella leaves. And Troy says, I can understand your concern, Ensign Sutter, but you really have nothing to worry about. It's normal, healthy activity for children to engage in imaginary play. And he says she's not making any other friends. She's spending all of her time with Isabella. And Troy points out that they've moved from ship to ship. So she hasn't had time to get to close to somebody. And if she gets close to somebody, then they transfer to another ship. So they're going to be spending a great deal of time on the Enterprise. So hopefully that will, she'll gain some friends on the Enterprise. And Troy just tells him to give her a chance. So while they're having all these meetings with Isabella, they're heading into this pink nebula. I just thought I'd point that out. So then we get a voiceover from the captain. Captain's log, Stargate 458521. The Enterprise has arrived at FGC-47, a nebula which formed around a neutron star. We are eager to navigate the unique formation. Geordi says we've got elevated quantities of hydrogen, helium, and tritium, but nothing the shields can't handle. Riker says shields up. Picard says take us in, and it's in 1/4 impulse power. So they go in to the nebula, and something comes into the ship. Then Data and Geordi are walking down the hallways, and Data is saying in order for the lateral sensor to complete their scheduled observation, additional processing time will be required. Geordi says we could steal a couple of hours from engineering team while they're recalibrating the interferometers. Data says, will 2 hours be enough time to complete the high resolution on the neutron star? Geordi says, no problem. We'll just double up the main sensor bandwidth while they're freeing up the lateral unit. And you see the fly go down the hallway. Then, for whatever reason, we catch up with the doctor and her nurse. Her nurse is dating some guy, and they talk about the date, and Dr. Crusher suggests some different places that they could go on dates. I thought there was a cute plant. Looks like a lady sitting down with the legs hanging down, a nice colorful hat. I just thought I'd point that out. So we have Clara in the garden. She's planting some seeds, and she's gonna water them. She promised Tico that she would do this. Keiko. So excuse me, Keiko, that she would do this, and we get an interruption. So all of a sudden, we can see Isabella, and so can Clara, and they have a little discussion. She wears a sour expression most of her time in the Enterprise. And Isabella wants to know if she's happy. Doesn't it make her happy that she can see her for real? Clara says, yes, it's wonderful. Isabella wants to go, and Clara wants to stay and finish her planting. She promised Kiko she would do it. Isabella doesn't want to do it. She wants to go someplace else. And Clara I need to go ask my dad, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And Isabella just, no, I want to do this, and we're going to do this. If you're my friend, we're going to do this. And she's a little forceful. She's given a little hint off of evil there. We don't like it at all. She's a bad influence on the kid. At first, they were talking about what they should name the nebula. Sutter said, why don't we call it Sutter's Cloud? Geordi says, why don't we call it LaForge Nebula? And Data vetoes both of them and says, I prefer FGC-47. Then the ship rocks a little bit. Geordi says it felt like we hit something. Data checks the sensors. The sensors show that there is nothing around to hit. So they investigate. The bridge gets in on it. Worf says velocity is down by 2% and dropping. Picard contacts engineering. Geordi said there could be something wrong with the shields. We're checking it out. Sutter checks out the shields. They're normal. Geordi says, so did we hit something or not? Shields say yes. Sensors say no. And then in the middle of all this, Clara ends up in engineering. And Geordi's like, why are you here? And she points to Sutter, saying that's her daddy. And she says, well, her father says you can't be here right now. And Clara tells him that Isabella wanted to see engineering. And Sutter says, I don't care what Isabella wanted to see. You go back to your quarters right now. And Clara goes, but daddy. And Picard contacts the bridge. Our speed is still dropping. Geordi says, I hear you, Captain. I'm increasing our power to impulse engines, but velocity just isn't consistent with engine output. And Picard asks for an explanation. Geordi says it seems like there's an increasing drag on the coefficient on the ship. We can't find the source. If we can't correct it, we may have to reverse course and leave the nebula. Geordi says, give him a few minutes. And Sutter says, Clara, you need to leave now. So they leave. And Sutter apologizes to Geordi. Okay, so they leave, but Isabella has something to do first. She says, Clara, stay right here. I'll be right back. Because Isabella heard them say that if they don't fix it, they're going to have to leave the nebula. Clara wants them to stay in the Isabella wants them to stay in the nebula. So she goes and she fixes the issue. Everything returns to normal on the ship. And then she returns to Clara and they go off again. So Isabella fixes everything, and we go back to engineering, and Data's like, our velocity is fallen by 12%, and then all of a sudden, the velocity turns around and increases. And Geordi's like, that's great, what'd you do? And Data's like, I didn't do anything. It just fixed itself. So then Clara asked Isabella where she went, and Isabella said she had to fix something, and now she's back. Then we're in the observation lounge. Geordi's saying, I don't have an explanation, Captain. We seemed to hit something, then we started losing speed. So as far as we can tell, there's nothing out there to hit. Riker says, could be some kind of dampening field, have caused us to lose velocity. Data says, we have simulated several such fields, but we're unable to reproduce the same drag efficient. Geordi says, we still don't know why the problem suddenly corrected itself. Picard said, it seems we're looking at a unique phenomenon, one that hasn't been recorded before. Geordi says that the question is, do we stay here and check it out? Riker says, might be dangerous. Data says, since we only have experienced the phenomenon once, it's impossible to estimate the risk. Geordi says, Captain, I'd like to stay here for a little bit, collect some samples of the gaseous matter, see what it tells us. Picard says, agreed, collect your samples. Mr. Ford will proceed with caution. Then Isabella wants to go in the cargo bay. Clara says, we can't go. Isabella says, let's go someplace with a lot of people. And she said, okay, Isabella, why are you so serious lately? And Isabella says, what do you mean? You haven't even smiled today. Isabella attempts to smile. She doesn't do it very well. Clara says, you're my best friend. Isabella says, why? Clara says, I don't know, because we do things together and we trade secrets. Isabella says, does everybody have a best friend? Clara says, if they're lucky, before I had you, I didn't have one. Why not? Every time I made new friends with somebody, her dad's job would change. Like I said before, you know, you move around a lot. Military families probably go through this. Maybe why they ran this type of story. Maybe someone in their family was going through this, where they had a child who, because they were moving around a lot, you know, had troubles with friend issues, maybe had behavioral issues, and maybe that's why they brought this episode up. But then they run into Worf. Worf says they shouldn't be there, and he says that if they return to where they were, you know, return to where they're supposed to be, he won't report them. Worf leaves, and then they turn around and go back to where they were going again, where they shouldn't have been going. Okay, then we end up in engineering again. Geordi's like, okay, I've configured the magnetic coil to collect samples of the gaseous matter from the nebula. Go ahead and activate the beam emitter. Sutter says, I'm setting the fractionator to a continuous cycle. Geordi says, we'll take samples from 8 random sections, though that ought to give us a reliable measure. Sutter says, Commander, I understand that you had a parent who was in Starfleet. Geordi says 2 of them, as a matter of fact. My mother was an exozoologist and my mother was a commander. Sutter says they must have been posted to a lot of different assignments. Jody says that's putting it mildly. They were always on the move, some of the time together, some of the time separately. I never knew whether or not I was going to be stationed with my father or my mother or both at any time. Sutter wants to know if that was hard on Jody. Jody says no, he looked at it as an adventure. Maybe a girl would look at it differently, but Jody thought it was an adventure. At least that's how he remembers it now that he's an adult. Then we get Data and Guinan looking out the window in 10 forward. Guinan says it's a Sumerian coral fish with its fin unfolded. Data says, I believe what you are seeing is the effect of a fluid dynamic process inherent in the large-scale motion of highly ratified gas. Guinan says, no, first it was a fish, now it's a Minotone sailing ship. Data says, where? She says, right there. Don't you see the two swirls coming together from the mast? Data says, I don't see it. Interesting that people try to find meaningful patterns in the things that they are essentially random. I have noticed that the images they perceive sometimes suggest what they are thinking about at a particular moment. Besides, he says, it's clearly a rabbit. I guess that was supposed to be funny. I don't. Okay. So Isabella and Clara go into 10 forward. Guinan says it looks as though someone has lost their way. And she asks Clara if she's looking for anybody. And Clara says, no, I brought Isabella to see 10 forward. Guinan says, oh, I see. Well, ordinarily, we would only let you in with a grown-up, but since you've brought Isabella, you can be my guest. Why don't you join me? She takes her over to the bar, and she serves her, papaya juice with extra bubbles. So then she serves her the papaya juice with bubbles. And I was thinking, whatever happened to Ginger Ale or Shirley Temple? And Guinan tells her about her imaginary friend, that it was a Caucasian razor beast, that it had brown fur and gold eyes and had huge spiny wings, and it would fly so fast that no one could see it but Guinan, and she would curl up and sleep in its stomach at night. And then Troy comes in. So Troy comes in and says, hello, Clara. Clara says hello. Guinan says, Clara and Isabella and I were just having a conversation. Troy says, would you and Isabella like to come for a walk with me? Clara says, I guess so. And Clara says goodbye to Guinan. Troy says, you haven't been on this ship very long, so maybe you don't know, but 10 forward is usually for grown-ups. I know that. I didn't want to go there, but Isabella wanted to see it. If Isabella is making you things you know are wrong, you must tell her that it's not acceptable. I try, but she's not listening. That should be warning bells. If Isabella is making Clara do things that are wrong, maybe there's something else. If these ideas are not Clara's, and if they are not what she wants to do, then she shouldn't do them, and she shouldn't let peer pressure make her do things she doesn't want to do and knows that these things are wrong too. Troy suggests she speaks to Isabella. It's not nice to get Clara to do things that she isn't supposed to. And then Clara says she's over there, so then Troy repeats herself. And then after Troy says all this, Troy says, what does Isabella say? And Clara says, she says, you better leave us alone. There's another warning bell right there. So then Troy has a talk with her father, and she says, I'm a little concerned at the turn this is taking. It seems Clara is beginning to do inappropriate things and blaming them on Isabella. Suda says, she came into engineering today. She says it was Isabella's idea. Troy says, I don't think it's too serious yet, but we should make more of an effort to get her involved with real friends her own age. The children's center's having a ceramic class this afternoon. Why don't I take Claire? Suda says, I think that's a good idea. I'll see if there's any room left in the class. In the meantime, I think you should make yourself more available to Claire. Let her know she doesn't have to rely on Isabella when she needs someone to talk to, that she can talk to you. So then we're back in the quarters, and Claire is doing a puzzle, and Isabella is making trouble. Claire invites her to do the puzzle with her. Isabella doesn't want to do the puzzle. She wants to go walking around the ship. She wants to go exploring. She wants to go to engineering. Clara doesn't want to do any of those things. Then Troy shows up and asks Clara if she would like to go to a ceramics class that she had asked her father about. Clara decides, yes, I will go to the ceramics class. So Clara agrees to go to ceramic class. So then we're back on the bridge. Data says, Sir, as we move deeper into the nebula, sensors indicate that the levels of helium and tritium are continuing to rise. Because it is something that the shields can't handle, Data says, no, so we are well within tolerance levels. Then the ship shakes and the lights flicker and other things happen. Mr. Data, shields have registered an impact, he says. Picard says, but the sensors show nothing out there, right? Data says, there's no indication of anything near the ship. Worf says, forward velocity is dropping, Captain, down by 4%. Picard says, can we go to warp speed? Data says, until we determine the cause of the drag coefficient, I would not recommend it. Worf says, forward velocity is down by 1.1%. Picard says, Ensign, increase power to the impulse engines. Aye, sir, impulse engines now full power. Worf says, we are no longer losing speed. Forward velocity is holding steady. Data says the drag coefficient is still present, but it has stabilized. Picard says, bridge to Commander Riker. Check with Mr. LaForge. See if he found anything in the matter sample from the nebula. And Riker's like, I'm away. So then Riker comes down and says, any luck? He goes, George says, yeah, take a look at this. We tried radiating the subject matter with just about everything we could think of. We didn't find anything until we subjected it to a high-frequency warp field. We think this is what we've been running into. Riker says, do you know what it is? We think so, says Geordi. Now the sensors can read it. It seems to be a highly cohesive form of plasma, like a strand of energy. Sutter says, we figure it's a segment of just part of a network of a much larger strands. Jody says, when these things come into contact with our shields, it produces a resonant effect, and that creature drag coefficient has been experiencing. Riker says, is there anything like this on record? Jody says, no. Riker says, do you know how many of them are out there? Jody says, no. If we run the warp field generators through the deflector flag, we could radiate a field outside the ship. Riker says, then we've been able to see for ourselves. Let's do it. So they do it. So then Troy takes her to the ceramic class. Troy introduces her to Worf's kid, Alexander. He teaches her how to do the clay. It's a really cute interaction until they need more water, so Alexander gets up. Isabella destroys his project. Alexander gets upset. Clara denies doing anything about it. He's sitting there arguing with Clara in front of him. He's behind her. They're facing face to face, and he gets hit from behind him, and he turns around, and there's nothing there. It was Isabella that hit him. So then we're back on the bridge again. Worf says field generators are standing by. LaForge says, Captain, we should be able to illuminate any strands within 2,000 kilometers of the ship. Picard says, proceed. Geordi does it, and they bring up a spider web. Let's see if I can get it. I don't know if I can get it. I don't know of how much of that you can see this way. So they talk about it. And Jordy says, Captain, with this many of them, the resonator effect on our fields could cause a problem. Proceed, Ensign. Take us about. Take us out of the nebula. It may be difficult, sir. I'm detecting significant strands behind us. Do your best. And they go out. So Troy gets hot chocolate from her uh, thing, replicator, and she puts it down, and Isabella tips the glass over, and Troy wasn't even anywhere near it. Nothing happened. The ship didn't rock. There was nothing happened. So she gets up and gets a towel to clean it up. She fixes the cup and gets the towel. When she comes back, the cup is on its side all over again. So they're really into their projects, and then this is where Isabella damages everything. So then Isabella goes back to the Arboretum. She's all upset. She's crying. She's upset with Isabella. Clara wants to know why you're crying. Isabella wants to know why Clara is crying. Clara says, why are you being so mean to me? Why'd you do that to my friend? Isabella says, because you ran away from me. You left me alone. I had to do everything by myself. Clara says, you're scaring me. Isabella, I was going to protect you, Clara. I liked you, but now I don't care. Now when the others come, you can die with everybody else. Gets a little scary here. So then we're back on the bridge. Data says our current speed will clear the nebula in 12 minutes 4 seconds. Picard says continue full sensor sweep. I want all information we can gather. The ship shakes a few times. Captain, forward velocity is down by 0.6%. That happens again. It goes down by 2.4%. Picard says data. Data says we're moving through a dense concentration of energy strands. Riker says, can we go to warp? Geordi says the stress on the hull would be too great. Data says, Captain, density appears to be lower off the starboard bow. Picard says, Ensign, bring us about 30 Mark 5. And they do that. And then the velocity holds. And then we go back to 10 forward. So Troy is sitting there looking at a piece of cake. Guinan comes over, wants to know if there's something wrong with the cake. Troy says, excuse me, well, I see you sitting here with a piece of untouched chocolate cake in front of you. I'm assuming something's wrong with the cake or something's bothering you. Troy says, I'm sure the cake is fine. I just been thinking. Let me guess about the little girl with the imaginary friend. Troy says, I'm wondering if I'm doing the right thing. Guinan says, how so? Well, I know the best thing to do is gradually wean her away from her fantasy, and she did make some new friends today and had a good time. But I can't help feeling that I'm taking something from her, something precious, a part of her childhood she'll never have again. Guinan says, well, I'm not sure about that. I was just telling Clara about my imaginary friend. You have an imaginary friend? Our Tarkasian razor beast, it protected me. I knew as long as I had the razor beast was around, nothing could hurt. You know, over the years, his body kind of faded away, but the idea stayed. And I just don't seem to talk to him as often as I used to. You still talk to him? Oh, yeah, I'm afraid. When I'm afraid or if I get confused or a little scared, I don't think you should have to give up an imaginary friend. And then Sutter calls Troy. So Sutter explains that Clara is afraid to go in her room. So Troy sits down with Clara. Your father tells me Isabella has been saying some very bad things to you. What did she say? Clara said she said they were going to come and kill everyone. Who's going to come and kill everyone? The others like her. Did she say why? I know you're very frightened. Sometimes we imagine we can be just as scary as something real. I promise you there's no way Isabella can harm you or anyone on this ship. But she's not imaginary anymore. She's real now. I can see her. You can see her? Yes. If I go with you and hold your hand, will you go into the room? So they go and investigate in the room. And Troy gets a wake-up call. So then, uh, Isabella shoots Troy and knocks her out. So then Troy is in sick bay. Um, she says that she looked about 11, 12, blonde hair. And Dr. Crusher says Clara's sleeping. She's going to be fine. Her bioelectrical process was severely disrupted. It's as if the energy was pulled right out of her body. Captain says Clara told me that her imaginary friend has been making threats. She claims that the others were on this ship and that they had plans to kill everyone on board. And Picard calls Worf, and Worf answers his call. Picard says, we've established the presence of appears to be an alien entity on board. It seems the entity has manifested itself in the form of a 12-year-old human girl who has been seen with Clara Sutter. She has blonde hair, blue eyes, and a blue dress, Worf says. I've seen her. When 2 days ago near engineering, she was with Miss Sutter. So Picard issues a security alert. Worf says he'll keep an eye out. Clara tells her father, I think her feelings were hurt. She said she liked me. She liked being with me. She was my friend. She only got mean when I stopped paying attention to her. Sutter said, did she say when the others were coming? All right, thanks, sweetie. You go back to bed now. We'll handle this. And Claire says, but Daddy, Picard says, Claire, if we need your help again, I hope we can count on you. Yes, Captain. And Captain goes to the bridge. So Picard goes to the bridge. Riker says our speed is down 22%. LaForge says strand density is 10 times what it is, Captain. We can't take many more of these hits. Picard says I'll stop. Worf says something is heading toward us, bearing 103 Mark 0424. I put it on screen. There's a firefly coming towards the ship. Data says it appears to be an energy vortex of high complex patterns, possibly a light form. Riker says red alert. Data says in direct physical contact with our shields. Worf says shield strength is dropping 75% to 72. Riker says, damn, the thing's feeding off our shields. Mr. Data, remodulate our shield frequency. Data says no effect. Worf says our shields dropped to 64%. Geordi says we've got 8 minutes. And Riker says, any ideas? So they go to the Arboretum. So they all head into the Arboretum. So then Isabella shows herself to everybody. Picard asks, who are you? Isabella says, I came here to determine whether you were a threat to us and determine the purity of your energy sources. Energy. Is that why you're draining our shields? Isabella, yes. The emissions from your graviton field generators are far richer than our normal source of energy. Picard to bridge. Report. Shields down to 3%. We're diverting all available power. Acknowledged. If it's energy you want, we have other ways of providing it. You don't need to destroy us. Isabella says, you should be destroyed. You are cruel, uncaring creatures. What makes you say that? Picard says. The way you treat Clara, Isabella says. In what way have we mistreated her? You wouldn't let her do what she wanted to do or where she wanted to go. Picard said, you mean where you wanted her to go? What difference does it make? You were taking her to places that were inappropriate, even dangerous. I wouldn't have let her get hurt, Isabella says. We didn't know that. We didn't know if you were real. All we knew was that a little girl's imaginary friend was frightening her and threatening her. That was only after you told Clara not to be my friend. I understand, Picard says. You are seeing this ship, all of us, from a unique perspective, from a child's point of view. It must seem terribly unfair and restrictive to you. As adults, we don't always stop to consider how everything we say and do shapes the impressions of young people. But if you're judging us as a people by the way we treat our children, and I think there can be better criterion, then you must understand how deeply we care for them. When our children are young, we don't understand what might be real or dangerous. Our rules are to keep them from, stop at the corner, wait for the crossing light, stop at the stop sign, don't bully other people, Don't go into that gutter. Don't use that knife the wrong way, or let me cut your meat until you're old enough to do it yourself so you don't cut yourself. Don't stick your finger in a light socket. We have all these precautions to protect children, and they're there for a reason. And he explains all that to Isabella, and she leaves. I just wanted to share this. We all have a nice little talk, and he explains everything to Isabella. Then we're back on the bridge, and they're clearing the strands, and everything is returning to normal. Isabella comes to see Clara one final time. Isabella says, I came to say I'm sorry I frightened you. Clara says, that's okay. And I missed you. I wasn't really your Isabella. For a while you were. I never had a friend before. I'm sorry I have to go away. Do you think you'll ever come back? Clara says, I hope so. And leaves. And that's the end of the show. That's the end of the episode. So that was the end of Imaginary Friend. We did the perfect rate. We just finished the Imaginary Friend. Next week we got an exciting episode of Bored. And then we have the next phase. And I hope you will stay tuned for my If Then episode later this afternoon around 1. So please check that out if you like this author, maybe like that author. And please like and subscribe and let me know I'm doing a good job. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a good one.